Hello, my name is Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I like to use my master's in English to discuss horror books and other genres as well from an academic standpoint. But I also enjoy just having fun talking about books with all of you. Today's video is a book recommendation video featuring Good for Her horror. Let's get started. So, first of all, let's define good for her horror. This idea of good for her comes from an episode of Arrested Development, which was then turned into a meme. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on that because I want to spend my time on this video instead, taking that idea and putting it into the horror genre. So, in horror, when we think of good for her, we think of women who overcome traumatic situations to enact revenge or to empower themselves within the confines of the system that has oppressed them and being able then to break free of that system. So, women in these stories will often become violent in order to enact their revenge and to receive justice that they likely would not have received in any other way had they not taken their empowerment and their breaking free from oppressive systems into their own hands. But not all of the women resort to violence either. So I want you to keep that in mind, that while I support women's rights and I support women's wrongs, some of this will definitely be a bit tongue in cheek. I'm not out here literally advocating for women to misogynistic men. Nah, not I'm not literally suggesting that. Okay, so let's get into the books before I get myself into some trouble. While I've enjoyed the good for her horror trope for quite some time, I had the idea to go ahead and do this video after recently finishing A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. So, in this book, we're following the main character, Dorothy, who is a food critic, and she also indulges in some of men in her life. Not only does she do away with these men, but she also serves part of them up in delicious dishes that she prepares for herself, while she also eloquently describes all of her deeds in very beautifully written prose. She talks about her sexual, her culinary, and her murderous escapades to the absolute delight of the reader. So, this one, while many people would not consider it good for her, if you're looking at this from a purely entertainment kind of view, which I hope you are, I found this to be absolutely good for her. So, moving on to the next book. I've got such a stack here. But the next one I want to talk about is Cackle by Rachel Harrison. If you are just beginning to dip your toes into the horror genre, this is an excellent place to start in the good for her trope. So, we're following our main character who is coming out of a relationship with her fiance, and she has devoted her entire time to him to the detriment of building friendships and also to the detriment of really being herself and kind of discovering who she is and what she wants in life. So after the breakup, she moves to a small town. She's a teacher. She gets a teaching position and she meets this woman who's a bit older than she is. And she's very intrigued by this woman. The woman is very much comfortable with being who she is, people in town seem to simultaneously almost worship this woman, but also be fearful and a bit judgmental of her too. And this woman, we find out, may or may not be a witch. But what we do get in this book, as far as good for her goes, is the way that our main character learns to embrace who she really is, learns to stop letting the judgments of others cloud her life, and really begins to come into her own. And this one is a lot of fun. There are some gross elements, but I definitely consider this to be a good start for those of you just getting into horror. Again, this is Cackle by Rachel Harrison. The next two books that I'm going to talk about are perfect for fans of Frankenstein. Even if you're not a fan of Frankenstein, I do believe you would also enjoy these books too. So, the first one I want to talk about is Poor Things by Alistair Gray. So, this one is featuring a created woman by the name of Bella Baxter. And I don't want to give a lot away. I just want to say that she embraces who she is. In some ways, it's because she doesn't know any better than to just indulge in whatever her desires are. But within that extreme, there is so much commentary on gender identity, on women's sexuality, women's empowerment, women in society. And I just had an absolutely delightful time with this book. I enjoyed the movie too. So, the next book I want to talk about that fits in with fans of Frankenstein is Our Hideous Progeny by C.E. McGill. So, this was one of my favorite books that I read in 2023. So, in this, we're following a woman by the name of Mary who discovers that she is the niece of Victor Frankenstein. She and her husband are scientists and they're trying to make this discovery, really get their names out there. Of course, this is set in Victorian era, so this woman, our main character Mary, has a lot of trouble being able to be heard and taken seriously in scientific circles because Victorian society, right? But she finds notes that her uncle, as I mentioned, Victor Frankenstein, wrote as far as creating life. So she ends up creating life, but it is a dinosaur like creature. And I had no idea going into this how much I would absolutely fall in love with this book. So, our husband, we find out, is kind of a not so great guy in a lot of ways. And Mary is able to overcome the obstacles that she faces to create a life both professionally and personally that is the one that she always wanted to have. And that's all I really want to say about it because I don't really want to give too much away. My main goal is to put these books out there to pique your interest and help you find good for her horror that works for you. So let's move on to my next book I want to talk about. Now we're switching gears to poetry. I have recommended this book on my channel before, and I will recommend this book anytime I get a chance to do so. And that is I Am Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland. So in this book, she takes final girl characters and even girls or women that we wish had been final girls but weren't quite there. And she creates poetry from their point of view. So I just want to read one of the poems to you. I read in another video the poem Carrie, and I will be linking that down in the description box below. So let me share with you the poem Rosemary. Of course, written from the perspective of Rosemary in Rosemary's Baby, written by Ira Levin, and the movie is directed by a real POS guy, Roman Polanski. But let's read the poem. It always begins with good intentions of men. Her body on the deck of a ship, inert and shining. The way he carried her down the hall like a child, like a duffel bag. The promises he made when he put her to bed. This is for us, he probably said. Then in the morning, how he could look at her only sideways. How he grinned sheepishly at her half-asked question. You? While I was out? Then shrugged, brushed his teeth, got dressed. Meanwhile, she still dreams of the ship, of cold waves lapping at unsheltered thighs, still wonders at the scratches marking her skin. She's not so naive. She senses in the organ deep way women sense things. It's not the devil you need to worry about, but the devil you know. Again, that is Rosemary from Claire C. Holland's I Am Not Your Final Girl. The next book I want to talk about is more of a thriller than a horror book, and it is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. This often tops the list when I'm asked for good for her horror. So we follow two points of view in this book. We follow the point of view of Scarlett, who is a professor who makes it her mission to unalive men who have committed certain acts against women. And we also follow Carly, who is a college student whose best friend has experienced such an attack as that. And she is trying to deal with that and trying to help her best friend and also find vengeance too. So this one is wonderful. I love it so much. It's absolutely, to me, like the epitome of good for her. I don't really want to say much else about it. Just go into it knowing that you've got these two timelines, you've got these two really incredible women, and the way that the story ends up weaving their stories together is excellent. And that's all I want to say about it. But it is so empowering. Scarlett is one of my favorite women characters of all time. The next few books are in the books I have tabbed the hell out of collection, but let's talk about it. This is Bunny by Mona Awad. Now, it has been a few years since I read Bunny. Bunny is very hard to explain, so forgive me, but I'm going to read the synopsis of Bunny for you. A scholarship student who prefers the company of her dark imagination to that of most people, Samantha Heather Mackey is utterly repelled by the rest of her graduate fiction writing cohort at New England's elite Warren University, a clique of unbearably saccharine yet sinister rich girls who call each other Bunny and seem to move and speak as one. But everything changes when Samantha receives an invitation to the Bunny's fabled smut salon and finds herself inexplicably drawn to their front door, ditching her only friend, Ava, in the process. As Samantha plunges deeper and deeper into the Bunny's world and begins to take part in their monstrous experiments, the edges of reality begin to blur. Soon her friendships with Ava and the Bunnies will be brought into deadly collision. It's like a fever dream. If you like a fever dream, weird kind of book, then Bunny is a good one. A good for her dark academia genre book. So, continuing on with this same author, I didn't mention who this is by, Mona Awad. And I also have All's Well by Mona Awad. Now, I actually enjoyed All's Well even more than Bunny, and I freaking love Bunny, but All's Well is just, it just did it for me. So again, we're following kind of this dark academic setting. We have a theater professor who teaches at a college. She is putting on a play with her students. They all want to do Macbeth or the Scottish play or the play that cannot be named. And she wants to do All's Well instead. So this one not only delves into the realm of good for her, dark academia, but it also deals with chronic pain. So we have chronic pain rep. And again, it's been a while since I read this one. And if you know anything about Mona Awad, you know that her fiction is weird in the most wonderful and delightful way. But just to help you get a clearer picture, I'm going to read the synopsis of All's Well too. But first, I'm going to hit my microphone. I'm a real pro here, right? Okay, so moving on with the synopsis and a ton of notes I have here. Miranda Fitch's life is a waking nightmare. The accident that ended her burgeoning acting career left her with excruciating chronic pain, a failed marriage, and a deepening dependence on painkillers. And now she's on the verge of losing her job as a college theater director. Determined to put on Shakespeare's All's Well That Ends Well, the play that promised and cost her everything, she faces a mutinous cast hell bent on staging Macbeth instead. Miranda sees her chance at redemption slip through her fingers. That's when she meets three strange benefactors who have an eerie knowledge of Miranda's past and a tantalizing promise for her future. One where the show goes on, her rebellious students get what's coming to them, and the invisible, doubted pain that's kept her from the spotlight is made known. So you do not have to have knowledge of Shakespeare going into this, but I do believe that it would enhance your enjoyment of this book if you built some familiarity with Shakespeare, especially the plays Macbeth and All's Well That Ends Well. Again, you don't have to, but I believe it will help you to enjoy this book even more. The next book with an obnoxious amount of tabbing that I want to talk about is The Final Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I know that a lot of people don't enjoy this one, but I absolutely adored this book. If you are a fan of slasher and final girl movies, I really think that you will have a wonderful time with this one. I love the peekaboo. What am I doing here? Anyway, so this one is pretty much what the title says. You have this group of final girls. They're in a support group. Their therapist is helping them deal with the trauma. I really enjoy the approach of this book. This idea of after these final girls survive, then how is the rest of their life going to play out? How are they going to deal with all of the trauma that they experienced? And I want to just give a quick rundown of the main characters in this book. We have Danny, who is very much based on Laurie Strode from Halloween. We have Heather, who is based on Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street. We have Julia, who is based on Sydney from Scream. We have Adrian, who is based on Alice from Friday the 13th. We have Marilyn, who is based on Sally from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And we have Lynette, who is from the movie or based on the movie Silent Night, Deadly Night. You may have also noticed the very meta way that Grady Hendrix takes the name of his characters from the real life actresses, the names who played those characters in the movies. I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that. Anyway, I think too, I want to talk about just a few of the notes that I had if you're kind of wondering about what I tabbed in this book. So anything tabbed in orange was examples of PTSD or the way that these final girls are dealing with the aftermath of the trauma they experienced. Everything I tabbed in blue is a movie reference. Everything I tabbed in red and pink is where we had like plot development taking place. Things that I tabbed in green made me laugh. If you're familiar with Grady Hendrix, you know that he mixes in quite a bit of humor with his horror. And then tabbed anything in purple that I found very interesting. So those are my tabs for this book. You also get, again, this very meta style where you have articles that are included and designed in this kind of format. So that just really made it a lot of fun. But the way that these women come together, the way that they continue to find their strength in the midst of traumatic events that start occurring again, we start to have someone who is picking off the members of this final girl support group. So the way that they come together and support each other, I just thought this was so much fun and a really fun, good for her example. The next book that I want to talk about offers a unique take on the possession subgenre, and that is Goddess of Filth by V. Castro. It's been a while since I read this one too, so I'm actually going to read the synopsis of this book as well. One hot summer night, best friends Lourdes, Fernanda, Anna, Perla, and Pauline hold a seance. It's all fun and games at first, but their tipsy laughter turns to terror when the flames burn straight through their prayer candles and Fernanda starts crawling toward her friends and chanting in Nahuatl, I hope I'm saying that right, the language of their Aztec ancestors. Over the next few weeks, shy, modest Fernanda starts acting strangely, smearing herself in black makeup, shredding her hands on rose thorns, sucking sin out of the mouths of the guilty. The local priest is convinced it's a demon, but Lourdes begins to suspect it's something else, something far more ancient and powerful. I want to share one of my favorite quotes from Goddess of Filth with you. And this is on page 105 in my edition. What drew me to these females was their love for each other, the strength within each of them to withstand the fires they live and the fires to come. So many fires you will have to endure if your generation survives. The next book I want to talk about is also written by V. Castro, and this one is The Haunting of Alejandra. I don't want to say a lot about this one because I have a response video to this where I speak just from a personal level about what this book meant to me. So I'll also link that video down in the description box below, but I will tell you a little bit about it. In this book, we're following Alejandra. She's a wife, she's a mother, and she is dealing with a loss of identity. She's dealing with thoughts of harming herself. She's battling depression. And in the midst of all of this, she's also dealing with this entity, this woman who keeps coming to her and whispering these terrible thoughts into her mind. And she's also struggling because she is forced kind of into this role by her husband. She is a Mexican American woman, and he doesn't really want her to embrace aspects of her culture. So that is something that is weighing heavily on her too. But she ends up overcoming all of this, and it's powerful. I don't want to say much else about it here, like I said, because I spent an entire video devoted to it, but I will link that down below, as I mentioned, so that you can hear more thoughts about this book. I just, I love this book. It's very near and dear to my heart. So, continuing on with books that I would say definitely would require some looking into content and trigger warnings. The next one I want to talk about is Mary by Nat Cassidy. And full disclosure here, I did not care for Mary. I'm in the minority in that. I absolutely adored Nat Cassidy's follow up book, Nestlings. But Mary just, it didn't work for me. But we are following a woman who is middle aged, which I did appreciate. She's experiencing menopause. Again, as a menopausal woman, I appreciate that too. But I just didn't end up liking this book as much as I wanted to, where she's experiencing some, typical to menopause issues, but she's also experiencing some non-typical issues where when she looks at her face in the mirror, it's all distorted, which she's also sees other women of her age and their faces seem to be distorted. She's lost her job basically because I would say of ageism from what I can remember. She ends up moving back to her hometown to take care of her aunt who is very sick. Her aunt has been abusive to her, but as she moves back, there's a cult that is present in the town. There's a serial killer, and somehow all of these things end up directly connecting to Mary. That's all I can really say about this. If it sounds confusing, that was one of the issues I have with this book. I felt like there was entirely too much going on. And as a woman who has experienced menopause, I am menopausal now. It's done. It's over for me. But that journey from perimenopause into menopause, to me, I would say is horrific enough without all these added layered elements of the cult and the serial killer. I don't know. I just felt like it didn't give me what I wanted. And Nat Cassidy also wrote this as kind of a response to, or a sister kind of novel in a way, to Carrie by Stephen King. And you can kind of see that because where we have Carrie, of course, experiencing menses or her first menstrual period, we have in this book Mary, who is experiencing the ending of hers. So I appreciate what Nat Cassidy tried to do, but it just didn't hit it for me. But I do say it's good for her. I would say it is good for her. That's why I put it in this video, and a lot of people love it. So there you have it. And the last three books I'm just going to mention here because I did extensive deep dive academic style videos based on these three books that I'm going to mention next. And that is Gerald's Game by Stephen King. I have tabbed the hell out of the last three books I'm talking about because they were all included in my thesis. The next book is Carrie by Stephen King. And then the final good for her horror book that I want to recommend is Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. If you have any horror book good for her recommendations that I have missed, please let me know in the comments below. If you disagree with me and you say, wait a minute, that's not good for her horror, let me hear about that in the comments too. If you have movie recommendations, I would love to know what those are also. Again, if you are watching, I want to just thank you so much for being supportive of me. If you would like to support me even more, then please hit that like button, subscribe, make sure to hit that bell so you'll never miss a video from me. Thank you again.